Dr. Jim Hoover is a clinical professor in the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. He has an extensive background in analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, forecasting, and operations research. He combines a long career in industry with his passion for academics and research. His commercial experience includes running several businesses and a large information technology and management consulting account for one of the world's largest consulting firms. Additionally, he built an analytics consulting practice, developing new skills and capabilities for an analytics workforce growing at over 20% per year. Dr. Hoover previously taught at the University of Pennsylvania and Florida Southern College. His current research is focused on the integration of artificial intelligence into business and big data privacy concerns.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit interactive. I'm a professor in the Warrington College, as was mentioned, and I do a lot of work with businesses. And so one of the things I do as the director of the Business Analytics and Artificial Intelligence Center is talk about how businesses are actually implementing AI and where I think things are going in AI. I talk to a lot of businesses about that. So what I want to talk about today is what are the latest developments in the implementation of AI in business. So I have several questions that I want to walk through during the talk. One is AI implementation in business a gold rush? And we've been through these kind of periods before in implementation. An example is, the dot-com era where the internet took off. Also, like if you think about it, when the smartphones came about. So there's been several times in the past where we've actually gone through a period like we're going through today. And so a lot of companies or startups are being built. A lot of companies are throwing a lot of money at AI kind of implementations. And so what we want to talk about is it a gold rush? And if it is, what do we do about it? And then one area that I think is especially important if you're going to graduate in the next couple of years and go into the field is the idea of like, how do you assess whether or not what the AI system produces is accurate or not? I think a lot of people, maybe some of your friends, they will just, whatever comes out of ChatGPT, they believe. And they just turn it in to their professor as is without actually checking to see that it's right. I think there's actually an entire field where people who are good at actually understanding how to assess the accuracy and modify the AI systems to get more accuracy can take off. And then lastly, I want to talk about an area that in the last month has become really hot field in AI, which is AI agents. As I walk through each of these questions, I'm going to pause and ask you for your feedback first, and then also talk about what I think. So my first question is AI implementation in business a gold rush or fool's gold? What do you guys think? Raise your hand if you think it's a gold rush right now. And why do you think that? Anybody?
Cheap labor, free labor.
Free labor?
I think it allows different ways for business.
Yeah. Anybody else have a different idea? Yeah.
It just like depends on you. I think and the way that some companies are using it, it's like fool's gold. And I think if used right in the correct way, I think it would be.
Have any of you ever worked with a company on an IT project before November 2022? So that dates when they released ChatGPT to the world and made it commercially available. And what companies used to do was they used to do a very deep business case analysis before they would like spend money on SAP or spend money on Oracle implementation or spend money on a cloud migration. They would actually think about like, how are we going to actually get a return on this investment that we're going to do? And I think what's happening right now is there's so much fear of missing out on this new artificial intelligence world that they're just willing to spend money and go tell their teams, go do something in AI. and they're not really doing the due diligence that they did before. So business spending on AI is increasing like crazy. A lot of projects actually outside of AI have actually had their finances reduced because the funding that is in IT is now being focused toward AI implementation. So the big questions for these companies, since they started doing this primarily in early 2023, is are you starting to see return on investment from those investments in AI? Then we'll talk about like where are companies potentially making money on AI? So I asked Dali Floor to make me a sign about the AI gold rush. Does anybody see any problems with that sign or with this image? What do you see?
A couple misspelled words.
Okay, so there's misspelled words, but there's something even more troubling about that picture.
Words are kind of like,
Yeah, would you want to be in this car? I don't think so. So my comment is, for all of those that think, oh, everybody's going to be out of work because AI is just wonderful. Guess what? Back to what I was saying about the accuracy of AI, it's just not there yet. And this is an easy example because it's visual and you can actually see it. If it's in words, people actually trust it more than maybe they shouldn't. So anyway, I use that as an example. This is an article from January about, whether or not from VentureBeat, which is for entrepreneurs, about whether or not this is a gold rush. And they talk specifically about the fact that there are a lot of companies doing a lot of things, and a lot of them are probably going to wash out. They're probably going to either be bought by somebody or they're going to go out of business. Why? One of the reasons is the same reason that when the dot-com bust happened and when we first got the smartphones, a lot of companies were building apps and the app companies didn't, survive, or they got purchased by somebody else because they never thought about how are we going to make money or how are we going to save money as a result of doing it. They just said, I got a good idea. And it's true that some of them were really good ideas, but then, if they don't make money, they don't exist forever because people don't want to continue to invest in them. So that's kind of what that article suggests. This is another image of kind of if I think about it, the adoption across business. And what you can see is that AI has been around a long time. Do you guys know AI has been around a lot longer since November 2022? My background's in analytics and AI and machine learning, and I have been doing that work for 35 years. Now, the systems have gotten better, the data has gotten better, but you can see kind of the adoption rate of companies, and you can see that fact that it's really taking off. The light blue line is the generative AI after November 2022. It's a lot of companies are actually trying things. So that's kind of the key takeaway from that. So who is making money on generative AI? What do you guys think?
like it says the picks and shovels, like NVIDIA.
If it's a gold rush, the people making the money aren't the people shoveling for gold. It's the people selling the shovel and selling the pan and selling, all the tools. So what does that mean? Like right now, the number one implementation area and the place where people are making the most money is in either the hardware like NVIDIA or the kind of cloud compute, cloud storage. And so, if you think about where money's being made right now with this new kind of AI gold rush, it's in those companies that are providing the picks and shovels. And if you think about OpenAI, did you know that that was the fastest ever to like 200 million subscribers? It's like Instagram took several years, but OpenAI took several months to hit 200 million. Their sales right now are, this is like from last year, so well over $2 billion. How many of you have a $20 a month account with OpenAI? Not many. How many have a $200 a month account? I don't have one, but that's where they're releasing all their cool stuff. Now, let's think about that. They have figured out that if they do this multi-tiering to the kind of their capability, that their capabilities in OpenAI, that they can write these subscription, kind of designed for revenue generation, and they're generating a lot of money. Guess what? They're still losing money. Even though they're well over $2 billion. Why are they losing money?
The hardware and cloud compute and everything that goes into making the business run.
Yeah, so GPUs, the NVIDIA friends that we have that have, made Hypergator so good, those are very expensive to buy and you need a lot of them and you need to put them in a data center and the data center, have any of you ever been over to see Hypergator in person? You need to do that before you leave. It's like walking into a Google data center. Like they have, a train-sized diesel engine to do backup power if GRU drops their power. They actually have, I don't know how many 100,000 gallons of water in a tank there that they recirculate to actually, dissipate the heat generated by all of those GPUs. You just need to see it. It's amazing. And they're more than happy to actually organize a tour if DSI wants to do that. You know, just click on the leadership over there and they'll let you go see it. But my whole point with this slide is that the picks and shovel people are the ones making money. And here's more evidence. It's like this is from Microsoft telling their investors in their quarterly updates, that they're required to file, hey, we're making a lot more money from cloud and cloud compute. So what are CEOs using ChatGPT and Gen AI to do? So there's quite a few areas where people are actually finding that Gen AI is pretty good. One of those areas is in marketing. Guess what? I'm a marketing professor. Marketing, if you think about it, has a lot of creative activities, a lot of like need to generate words and phrases and stuff. So in the marketing world, there's a lot of subtasks that need to get done in order to be effective at marketing. So an example is to create ad copy. Has any of you ever like written an ad copy kind of email? What was that like?
So I was writing copy for an app, not for YouTube, but just for an app. But it was just a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, right? And human time, and your time is very expensive, to be honest, relative to using a generative AI tool. So let's say that you had to do ad copy and you were doing a new ad every week. If you can do this, and right now, by the way, I would never just solely rely on AI to do this, but if you can do this where it's a human and AI together, you're much more efficient. You can generate 5 ads when you could previously only generate one. And the reason I say you can only generate 5 ads is because after the ad copy comes out, what do you have to do? You have to edit it. Do any of you think that Gen AI is 100% effective at doing this kind of work? No. I would never like send a document out that I told Gen AI to do without actually editing it. So ad copy is one. Do you guys know what SEO is? Search engine optimization. If if the idea behind search engine optimization is that you need to like produce words that people are going to read, the number one place where it's seen a lot of words together and knows like what people are going to react to is in generative AI. So that's another good area. How many of you are using GitHub Copilot to help your coding efforts? Are you prohibited from doing that?
Cursor's better than Copilot.
What is?
Cursor?
Yeah, there are other tools. I just used it as an example because I thought a lot of people might know about it, right? So I teach master's students to do business analytics projects. And this year I converted over, I just like said, whatever, we're going to do it. And I said, okay, we're going to use VS Code and, we're going to have Gen AI on the side. And what it has done is for those students who were not good coders to begin with, it's been amazing. They can actually type in the window over there and say, I want to do X, and it will do X. Or if you want to put a hashtag and kind of document your code, you say in the hashtag what you want it to do, it'll give you code that, for the most part, like 2 years ago, the reason I didn't implement it was like 70% good. Now it's 90 to 95% good. I very rarely now go to Stack Overflow to kind of figure out what's wrong with my code. Like, for instance, when Python deprecates some function that I needed, and now I have to figure out that I have to upgrade my package. That's something that sometimes ChatGPT doesn't get. Why would it not get that?
For the whole data.
It's trained on old data. Although most of the new applications are beginning to actually connect to the internet as well. And so they're addressing some of that issue as well. So for me, if I think about where there's a lot of actually good money being made, savings being made, it's in this area of making coders more efficient. We're not replacing coders, despite what you've heard about vibe coding. We're not replacing them. Vibe coding is kind of a nice thing to read about and stuff, but it's not capable of producing what a good coder could do, what a good engineer could do. However, it's helping a good engineer to be an amazing engineer. It's helping people to be so much faster, and for people who are at the beginning of their careers to actually accelerate, to learn how to do coding. Is that your experience as well? Okay. Another is images for marketing. Despite what I showed you about the sign a little while ago, there are actually not ChatGPT, but other firms that are actually very good at doing kind of computer-generated imaging. One particular area, just to talk about, an example that's not ChatGPT, is how many of you have ever taken training? You were hired by somebody, and the first thing they did on day one was sit you down, make you watch like 10 hours of video about how to do stuff. And think about how much money that company spent to produce those 10 hours of video. A lot. And what happens tomorrow if there's some new policy change that makes that video obsolete now? So there are companies out there that do training for videos where you just provide the script, and they will actually have what looks like a real life avatar actually give that presentation. You can tell it what language you want it in. You can write it in English and it'll do it in Cantonese. That kind of stuff actually is very useful and makes like the process of doing training videos much faster. That same process that's used for training videos, though, can be done for short commercials. Think about it for a minute. If you can do that kind of training video that lasts 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then it's very, very easy to do a 1 minute or a 30-second advertisement. I'm going to give you an example of that in just a minute. Another thing that it actually is pretty good at is, any of you ever tried to come up with a new product idea? I know you have. It's challenging to come up with these ideas, right? To come up with your startup kind of idea. So the answer is that it actually, because it's seen so many different kinds of people talking about products, it actually can think about new product ideas. I teach a new product class as well, and when I teach it, though, I tell them, back to my earlier caveat that AI is not accurate, to Google the idea they think is a good one from the list to see if it doesn't already exist, because sometimes it does already exist. So anyway, those are a few different ideas about where companies are actually taking advantage of it. If your CIO, CEO, CTO is actually trying to make money with that, those are good areas to consider. There have been some claims that companies are laying off people because of Gen AI. Have you heard that? Has anybody heard those rumors? Okay. I I want to clarify what's really happening is, every once in a while, companies lay people off and they look for a reason to do so, like to blame. And I think that in some cases, they actually did think that Gen AI was actually going to produce kind of great efficiencies and make it a lot better. But in fact, what happened is that they just made the layoff decision, perhaps even so they could hire some of you as, AI engineers to be able to help build the next generation. I would not put too much stock yet, at least, in the fact that AI is causing mass layoffs. I know there's some like real world concerns about it, but my own assessment in talking to businesses and actually seeing how they're implementing it, there are a few that are trying to do this just, I want to say, betting on the future advancement, but those are ones that will end up rehiring people before the year is out. Why? Because AI is not advancing, even though it feels like it, it's not advancing at such a pace that you can reliably replace humans who are doing work. Now, just what is actually happening is that back to the coding discussion, if I'm a coder at a company writing code, and then I'm the CEO, CIO, CTO, and I implement one of these tools, now maybe I don't need to hire as many people, right? Because my existing workforce actually becomes more efficient. And we are seeing a little bit of that. So I don't want to leave you kind of with the wrong idea. I gave a bullet point there from CNN about this because you're going to hear a lot of like, hey, the world's at risk because of AI. Your job is coming out of school is going to go away. It's not going to happen. At least I don't see it happening in the near term. And as I was telling some folks over lunch, my own assessment, given that I work with a lot of companies on real projects for those companies, is that one of the biggest areas, for all of us as you graduate, is that the data that's available in the real world needs to be cleansed, it needs to be joined, it needs to be, discovered, it needs to be integrated. And that really represents when I do a project with a company, 70% of the work on a data science project. The modeling piece is very small. And what I haven't seen is an AI system that actually knows how to do what I just said. So I'm not saying don't worry about it. I'm saying I wouldn't worry about it. I just keep pushing on my career. Okay. So there are a lot of people who think that this gold rush that I just talked about is a bubble. And last year, when I was talking to company CEOs, I would use that word, that it's a bubble. And what I meant by that was when you go through a period of time where you like invest all this money and then you don't get a return on it, a lot of people who are short-term focused are going to be very discouraged, and they're going to say, this was all a trick by Microsoft and Meta and all these companies, to get me to spend more money. The question that I ask for you guys is, do you think it's kind of worse than the dot-com bubble? And when do you see it actually downturning? Because I thought it was going to downturn at the end of 2024, and it didn't. So I now have to admit I was wrong about that. However, I also believe that you can't keep throwing money at something that doesn't actually give you a return. So either AI is going to like come up with something amazing and people are going to say, see, it was worth all my investment, or there are going to be some of these bosses that are going to be thinking, I could have spent money on X, Y, or Z, and instead I spent it all on AI. You'll have a limited amount of investment money to actually do things in your business. And if you spent all of it on AI and you don't get a return, you're going to be disappointed. So this is another article about that a lot of leaders already are actually beginning to do what I just said. They're beginning to ask, hey, I gave you the money in 2023. I know this is new technology and it takes a while to implement, but the question is, when are you going to actually show me a return? And it could be a cost savings or it could be a revenue generation. It doesn't matter. But if 85% are saying that, then that means that, that's something to be concerned about concerning a dot-com or like bubble for AI. Raise your hand if you think AI is a bubble. That's about half, a little over half. Interesting. Okay. So why is it that it's so hard to get this return on investment from Gen AI? What do you guys think?
Accuracy is just not fully there. You can't trust it.
Yeah. Why do you think that people made the leap that they should make the investment in the first place?
Uh, sorry. I think the prospect of something that significantly increases efficiency while like improving hardware gets cheaper and cheaper is something that is really appealing to anybody. And feel like I don't know what the future holds, but I feel like some company leaders thought we would be there a lot quicker than we are getting it.
Yeah, I think I have a couple theories myself, and I'm not sure they're right, but one of my theories is that do you know what anthropomorphize means? Anybody? Okay, it's like a $5 word. You can take that to your parents and say, look, your degree is giving me, some return. What it really means is we think it's human. Why do we think AI is human?
So
Hmm.
I think the tiny bit of extra accuracy that it gave on top of like search engines was really shocking to a lot of people, and its efficiency and quickness of giving the result.
I think that's a really good answer. Do you guys remember chatbots from 5 years ago? They were hard coded. I hated them. I still hate them, but I hate them less now than I did then. And a hard coded chatbot is awful, right? 15 screens later, it's finally giving me to the human who actually is going to answer my question. But what happened was the chatbots after Gen AI came out sounded like there was a human on the other end. They passed the Turing test, right? For those of you CS majors, they passed the Turing test. It seems like they're saying stuff like we would think that they're human. In fact, do they think like humans do? I mean, they're called artificial intelligence. Is their intelligence the same as our intelligence? Do you guys know how it works? You looked under the hood?
Like in some ways it's sort of similar. Like I know like if you tell an AI like, oh, pretend you're like an MIT professor, it can actually like get better at math because it like weights the neurons or the layers. So it's
Yeah. So let's talk about what you were saying. I actually, in the backup slides, have actually a slide that shows how ChatGPT really works. But the issue is that it's been trained on trillions of data points, right? Of how language happens. And it doesn't matter what language, by the way. It could be Chinese, it could be English, it could be, Arabic. It does not matter. If it's been trained, then what it does is it's a probability of next word generator given the context of whatever it's been asked. So it looks for that context. It then kind of generates words one after another. It decides when I want to put a period, and it looks reasonable because it's feed forward kind of network and long short-term memory networks are all part of the training of the Gen AI. So what it actually is, it's a probability of next word generator that sounds reasonable because of how many observations it's actually been exposed to. So that's why you guys know the word hallucination, right? That's why it hallucinates because it seems like that should be the next best word. Even I did a paper recently about, is Gen AI a good research assistant? Can it do a project by itself? And the answer is no, because it's doing this probability of next word generation. It's not thinking like a human. It's not thinking like we do. Maybe it'll get there one day, but I'm not, one of those evangelists on AGI right now. I think it's going to happen one day, but it's not. I don't think it's close. Yeah.
You've used ChatGPT recently. They added like a reason button.
Yeah.
Like, what does that do? Is that the same, or is it?
What it does is it forces it to rethink about the problem multiple times during the process of answering. And by the way, if you press that reason button, it actually takes longer to consider the problem thinks of more context in which to put it. But like one of the areas it does really poorly at, from a research perspective, is it does really poorly at doing literature review. It hallucinates papers and authors and topics and like abstracts like crazy. And it sounds like it should be a real paper, right? Because it looks at the context of it and it kind of gives that answer. So this is why that I think adopting it's hard, is that people are thinking that it thinks like a human and it doesn't. And I think also that they're not checking it for accuracy. Those two things are the reason that there is a problem here. Did you guys hear the story about the automobile dealership that, created a chatbot for its website? And somebody decided to negotiate with the chatbot over the price of an SUV. And they negotiated it down to $1. And then the guy sued the dealership because I want it for $1. Your chatbot told me it was $1. He lost, by the way, but I mean, thankfully he lost. But these are the kind of issues like you just can't trust them yet. Has anybody gotten into a self-driving car yet? Do you trust it? Okay, let me tell you a quick story. When I was 16, I got my license and I was working in a grocery store paying my way through high school. And my parents went to Silver Springs Park, really nice park here in Florida on the West Coast. And I was supposed to meet them after work. So 16, I just got my license. It was night. We didn't have GPS or anything. So I'm like following the road directions that I had. And all of a sudden in front of me, the road looked dark. And I didn't have 15 years of driving experience. I had, 15 days of driving experience. I stepped on the brake. Fortunately for me, because the road ended in a river, like one of those boat ramps that go into a river. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't have GPS, but the thing is, I was never trained to expect that to happen. So these edge cases that happen where they run into a pedestrian, it's because they've never been trained to do it. But yet we as humans seem to think a little bit more about like, hey, it looks dark there, like somebody may be about to step out in front of me, and we take action. So this is another reason why I think Gen AI is difficult, because it's not yet at a level of accuracy we feel comfortable with, which will come into play in just a minute. Anyway, this is a picture of different areas where AI is being used in business. I'm not going to drain this because I want to get on to my next question, but these are all areas where it actually is effective. So I'm not saying it's not effective. I'm saying it's not yet ready. This is another article about ROI. And then I have some suggestions for how to potentially make some money off of AI.
By ready, when will AI be ready in your mind?
Okay, that's a great question. I think if you can validate the accuracy is far better than the human who would make the same decision, it's ready. And you need to look at it in terms of what question are you asking it to solve and do that assessment. I think accuracy like measurement for AI is an area that is totally under researched, totally underpopulated in the commercial world. Do that.
Take a look at Perplexity.
Yeah, no, I've used it before and I think it's better. But let me tell you an example. If I use Perplexity to do my literature search, guess what? It's only uses open access articles. So instead of having an A journal article, it will have only those that it can see on the internet. It's not its fault. That's just access to the data it has available.
Let's give it better data.
Okay. So anyway, there's some articles here, but because I want to get on to the next topic, I'm going to skip. But I do think that some of the companies are learning from their attempts at implementing AI about what's working and what's not working. It's not like CEOs just throw money and then forget it. They do have feedback mechanisms that are kind of teaching them that, they need to be more diligent about these AI projects the same way they were about regular IT projects. And this is a Gartner article for anybody who wants to work with Gartner that, they talk about like how you can improve your ROI from AI projects. This is an area, how many of you saw this ad? Anybody? This is the Christmas Coke ad, which replicates a 1980s, 1990s series of ads that they ran, which just celebrates Christmas is coming. And originally, what they did was they hired trucks, they put these lights on them, they showed all these people. If you click on the hyperlinks for the original one and then compare it with the AI generated one, you can actually see how well it did and where it still has a little room for improvement. Having said that, Coke probably saved, I don't know, $4 or $5 million by using AI over using kind of recording it in the traditional way. They took a ton of heat for doing so. And the reason wasn't, even though people on Reddit or whatever would badmouth it because it was AI, it wasn't because it was like poorly done. It was because of that concern about like, what about all the creatives who didn't have the opportunity to make their money because you did it with AI? What they don't realize is that they actually had to hire people who had different skills to actually be able to like generate this AI and compile together all of these really short snippets into a 30-second ad or a 1-minute ad. So there are opportunities, and if you watch the two, like these slides will be available later so you can watch them. If you watch them, you think to yourself, that really wasn't that bad. It was really interesting. Would I care whether or not the ad for Corona on the beach is AI generated or it was generated by them actually filming on the beach? I don't really care. So those are the kind of things where I do think they actually can get some return on investment. And this is kind of a, discussion about the controversy. Okay, so I think that AI is more like, and you guys weren't around. When I went through undergrad, I went and did punch cards for my coding class, and I punched them in one building. I had to take my deck of cards to another building where they got read into the mainframe. Then I had to go to a third building to get my printout to learn that I totally screwed the program up, so go back to building one. So, I think that what we're experiencing now with AI is more like the introduction of the PC. There was a time where everybody didn't have a PC on their desktop. And what happened was, like, IBM made a grunch ton of money selling these like plain vanilla PCs, and people started figuring out how to best use them to make money. Like, for instance, the spreadsheet came out, Lotus 123, and that was really effective in business to be able to, I mean, so many things were done by hand and errors made and everything else that this made it really effective. And think about all the things you do on a computer today you don't even think about. I think that's where we're at with AI right now in business. What's the lessons for you? I think that all of this money that's being thrown at AI represents opportunity for students graduating. I think nobody out in the commercial world knows more about AI than you do. You've played with it more, you've figured out what it does well, you've figured out what it doesn't do well. You know what a RAG is, and that's not something you hold out here. These are the kind of things that are going to make you so valuable that if you put them on your resume, you talk about them in your interview, you talk about projects that you've done, even if they're projects that are nonprofit or whatever, that's actually very valuable. So don't discount the fact that you should do it. Point number two, we have some resources here at UF that are amazing. You can actually get into HyperGator if your professor is teaching a class in programming and you want to do something in AI. You can ask him to set up the class in HyperGator and you get free access to the fastest AI supercomputer in academia in the world. Another thing is, how many of you have used Navigator? A lot, right? Why do you use Navigator? First of all, you don't pay the $20 a month. And second of all, it's got lots of different kinds of Gen AI for you to test out and see what the differences are between them. Do that. If you can talk in your interview process about like all of the AI tools you know and how they're different, that's somebody's going to be, from the IT organization is going to be really interested in you. All right. I've mentioned this before and I want to be cognizant of time, but how do you think companies are assessing AI accuracy today? And how accurate do you think the LLM models are? Because they're the basis for Gen AI.
I think there's like a lot of work where it's easier to double check the work than to get that first pass. Like, so like I'm in CS, like for coding, it's much easier to get it to generate something and then just validate if it's correct, if it's handling all the edge cases correctly, then just write it out for yourself. So I think having an expert who can validate your work is like primary way. At least
Yeah. So, but even what you just said, a lot of companies are not doing it. A lot of companies are just believing it. So, give you a simple example. We're doing a project right now with a company where we are actually, as you know, we are actually trying to figure out where hospitals are spending more money. Every month they come out with like their expense statement, and that's a big business issue. Right now they probably have, I don't know, 10 people spending 4 hours a month working on just telling the CFOs of each of those hospitals where they're spending more money and going into like all of the, unique data transactions to figure that out. What department's increasing, what transactions causing the increase, why did it occur? And every month they're coming up with these 80 emails to 80 different CFOs of 80 different hospitals. So the issue is, how do we actually check that the algorithm that we are going to build for them that's going to automatically using isolation forest or using statistical process control methods, how do we know that's the right answer? Well, it's pretty easy for us, back to your point, to actually check the output of the statistical part of that. But then we also need to check the output of the LLM generation of the email. And one way to do that is to do a one-for-one comparison over the same period of time to see whether or not we found the same things, or at least the minimum of the same things, to be able to point out. So this is an area where I do think there's a lot of opportunity. And I also think that their AI is not so accurate. This is kind of an article about that from January about how they're struggling in advanced testing of LLM outputs. This is an article about the fact that it does things like accelerate coding and generating podcast kind of information. However, there's this dearth of checking the output. And, there are people who are out there saying that, like there's some automated testing capability that they can apply to this. But so far, my assessment is it's not that good yet. That's an area where they're really trying to develop kind of capability, and maybe that's something where they could hire some of our UF grads to kind of help them with. This is another reason why AI is not very good. So if I were doing a convolutional neural network to actually ask the question, is there a cat in this picture? I show it a bunch of pictures. If I show it a bunch of nice little kitten pictures over there, and then I show it a corgi picture, and then I show them next to each other, now we've really confused it, because if you know the way convolutional neural networks work, it's going to look for things like the pointy ears to kind of be kind of a triggering function to say that's a cat. So the more data it gets exposed to, the more it might see differences between the two, like the way the tail is shaped or something like that. But this is my point about accuracy and AI is we have a lot of ways to go. For any of you who are working on these kind of problems, in labs or whatever, or in assignments, this is why it's hard, and it's not solved yet. And just, I never want to leave a presentation without talking about a confusion matrix. How many of you know what a confusion matrix is? Don't leave UF without knowing what a confusion matrix is. It's a way to actually track accuracy and also to assess, false positives, false negatives, and so on. Okay. We're working with some companies where we're actually building the opportunity to actually design an assessment technique for a specific application. I'll give you a quick example. We're working with the USDA, Department of Agriculture, who every year comes up with new rules for food that need to be implemented. To implement a new food rule, they have to put the rule out and they have to wait for public comment. And then the public, because it's all on the internet now, thanks to the internet, there might be thousands of comments on a single proposed rule. Now, how do we do an assessment of, what people are saying? Currently, some poor schlub, probably an English major, has to read all of those comments and then come up with some kind of method to put them into buckets so that they can kind of assess what 5,000 people are saying about a rule. That's easily an area where AI could actually do something about, right? So AI is a language-based tool. The LLMs are a language-based tool. So they actually are pretty good at kind of summarizing. Any of you who fed a paper in and said, give me a summary, you get a decent summary. So anyway, we built a tool to actually to go to the API to bring down all the comments, to look at ones that have attachments that are PDFs so that it actually reads not just the comment, but the PDF that came with it, or PDFs that came with it. Then it will actually do then it will put them into groups, like if you think of k-means clustering or some other large language model or NLP task, you can think of coming up with the different topics that each of those are aligned with, that each comment is aligned with. So we finished that work, but the last step that we have to do is we have to do an assessment of whether or not the human reader who previously looked at those had a different assessment of whether or not, of what the topic was and what was it a positive or negative sentiment and all of that. So this is exactly the kind of work that I think needs to be done, and it has to be done in a domain of whatever the application you're building is. There's no generic AI capability to do what I just said, right? So this is why I think that's an amazing area to work in. This is just another paper I pulled down that says that there's importance of AI model estimation. Okay, last thing, I got 10 minutes left, right?
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk about is AI agents. How many of you have heard of AI agents? Raise your hand. How many of you used an AI agent? Raise your hand. What did you use the AI agent for?
Task is kind of an agent for looking through files.
Okay.
Tools to do that.
Yeah.
So just web session tools as well.
Okay. Either of you, go ahead.
I use a lot of deep research agents.
Okay, what do you use the deep research agents for?
Either research, kind of like you said, aggregating papers, or just if you have a big question you want answered and you really want to pull a lot of sources from the web, I use Complexity for that.
Okay, nice.
Kind of a similar thing. I've been working on a project full data from the USDA nutrition.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, cool.
Make an end-to-end label maker.
Very cool. Here's my AI agent made by Dolly. Okay. So this is a definition of an agent, like from the dictionary. An agent is something that is allowed by law to actually take action on behalf of another person. So when we say AI agent, some of the tasks that you guys talked about aren't really the kind of things that I would worry about from a legal perspective, right? Doing the research kind of thing that you talked about, I'm not worried about it. It might do it wrong, but I'm not like legally liable for the fact that it didn't do something right. Do you agree? So AI agents are those things where it's supposed to do something autonomously that you tell it to do. So a month ago, ChatGPT, OpenAI came out with this agent called Operator. Have you guys seen the video on that? Okay, so the hyperlink is here. If you want to watch the video, I highly recommend it. However, for sake of time, I'll just tell you that basically the researcher at OpenAI told it wanted to go to a restaurant, and it told it what kind of restaurant, but not which restaurant, and it wanted it to make reservations at a certain time and date, and the reservations actually required the use of a credit card. So let's think about this. So the operator itself is actually going to use the web browser as if it were a human. It needs to have access to your credit card in order to do the reservation. Do you guys feel comfortable enough with AI agents to give it your credit card? No. So this whole area is the new hot thing. It came out a month ago. A few other Gen AI companies have come out with operators that are for specific design purposes. But I think the big issue is it's like me as a 16-year-old driving the car and not going in the river. Now it's asking me to give it my credit card, and I don't have confidence that it can manage my credit card well. I'm not even confident I can manage my credit card well. So do I want to trust the agent to do the right thing, or is some, bad actor going to steal my credit card from the agent? Can they do a honeypot and now all of a sudden, I'm $15,000 in debt? These are the kind of issues like they come out with a new kind of capability, and Altman from OpenAI will sell the heck out of it, have these cool looking, demos where it goes to Yelp or it goes to like Instacart, and they don't tell you things like, hey, the website you're going to has to give you permission for a bot to be able to actually use your credit card and do something. And there are only like 3 or 4 websites who've agreed to do that. So AI agents is another area though, where if I were a student thinking about graduating, that I would consider spending some time thinking about. So this is Altman kind of advertising his new tool. And this is something from, I think that's X now, where they're talking about the fact that it doesn't work very well. Every time they come out with a new tool, that's an opportunity for you guys to have a job. So that's the takeaway I want you to get from that. And, here's some kind of key issues. Like another thing Altman's trying to do is to create proof that the bot is authorized to actually, take action on behalf of the human who directed it, because that kind of certification, if you want to think of it like a certificate that comes, for your website, he's trying to do that for these bots. That's another area where there's a whole field where you could have a job. All right. So I think just to wrap it up, to give you guys time to think about it, I'm going to flip through my slides. And, there's a whole lot of hype right now on AI agents. If you haven't heard it, you will. So think about that as another potential area. And I've got some questions here. All right, I want to take some questions. So I got about 4 minutes left. So who's got questions? I got a lot more slides, by the way. I just thought I'd talk about what's going on in business with AI. So, question? Yeah.
So, like, let's say a company, like an analytics company per se, wants to make an agent for their users, so like they can kind of like pull data from a database and
Yeah.
whatever, do analysis
Yeah.
on it. How would a company like that assess, like quantify the accuracy or the usability of that agent?
For something like that, you could probably write an algorithm that would like do it manually and then compare it. That would be an easier one to check. The bigger issue to me with an application like that is that have you ever had an API code you wrote in Python and then next week it doesn't work because they changed the API front end definition and now all of a sudden your API returns nothing or garble? So I think that's a real problem with doing the tasks you just talked about, not the actual. It's actually pretty easy to validate that the answer you get from a human and the answer you get from an agent would be the same in that scenario. You had your hand up.
Oh, what like the coolest, I guess, governance initiatives you've seen?
So there, I didn't talk about it, but there's a whole lot of stuff. Did you know the Pope actually has like an announcement that he's worked with several countries about AI and ethical AI? Unfortunately, the University of Florida signed up as a co-signer to that. So you may want to check that one out. It doesn't say anything religiously, but like there's stuff in there where I think it's impossible to actually do what they signed up to do. So just an interesting area. Yeah.
If AI is in a bubble, do you think that means it's like a bad idea to get into like AI engineering, or do you think still that
I think picks and shovels. I think AI engineers are going to make a lot of money for the next 10 years. And the fact that they're in a bubble, some of these companies are going to get bought. If you're the AI engineer at one of the startups, you're probably going to get bought by somebody. Microsoft's going to like make another $1 trillion. Well, thank you guys very much. I love talking to students. If you ever want to consider a master's degree in business analytics, we focus on actually doing projects with companies as part of the 10-month curriculum. And we love having coders from CS or our data science curriculums because you guys are I'm gonna put you on as a data scientist on one of the teams. Okay, thanks everybody.